conducted strikes against pro-government forces near their training base in the border region of Al-Tam for the second time this week.
US conducted strikes against 2 technical vehicles that were assessed to be posing a threat to coalition forces at Al-Tam garrison.
The coalition confirmed this is the third set of strikes in the region in 3 weeks. Washington says its actions were in defence against direct threats to its position.
It was necessitated, sir, by offensive movement with offensive capability of what we believe were Iranian-directed forces. I don't know that were Iranians on the ground, but by Iranian-directed forces inside an established and agreed-upon deconfliction zone.
Well, the US claims that all 3 strikes were in response to troops or military equipment entering a deconfliction zone. Moscow, though, says this isn't justification, and the Russian Foreign Ministry has blamed the US for declaring some of its zones in the country.
I'm not aware of the deconfliction zones the Pentagon is referring to. Maybe there are zones that have been established unilaterally, where the coalition thinks it can do whatever it wants. We don't recognize such zones. As you know, there are already de-escalation zones that have been agreed on and established by Syria, Iran, Turkey and Russia. Any steps by the coalition which don't receive consent from Damascus are not legitimate.
Well, the airstrikes took place in Al-Tam, an area of particular strategic importance. We can have a look at it in closer detail now. All of the parties to the conflict have been operating there, and it lies on the most direct route from Damascus to Baghdad in Iraq, which would allow Syrian pro-government forces secure passage to Iran, their closest ally in the region. Well, let's discuss all this a bit further with Jan Oberg. He's the director of the Transnational Foundation for Peace and Future Research, and he's with us now. Good evening to you, Jan. It's turning into a real flashpoint, isn't it, this particular region of Syria?
Yes, it is. I'm not a military commentator and I'm not an expert on these kinds of things, but I am kind of surprised, if anything can surprise us anymore, of the words which are being used here. First of all, deconfliction zone, what is that? The conflicts are still there, using the word deconflict. I mean, we are seeing conflicts being worked on by violence and nothing but violence since 2011. Secondly, the Americans seem, we just saw the Secretary of Defense say that he feels that this was offensive forces. I mean, I would say, excuse me, who is offensive in this? The Americans are in Syria without anybody having invited them to be there. And they seem to be, you know, both fighting ISIS and through allies supporting ISIS. And they seem to be heavily involved in supporting terrorists historically as well as Britain, as we have seen. Now, you're asking me who is offensive and who is defensive. According to Article 51 in the United Nations Charter, any country that is the object of or victim of international aggression has a right to self-defense. Now, if the Americans are in Syria, they must expect to be shot at. It's a sad case. And it tells me that all this nonsense that we hear in the world about there is only a political solution to Syria. We've heard this for 6 years, and they keep on fighting each other with military arms, with weaponizing the conflict, with supporting those who create more violence in Syria. It is intellectually, it's below the level of what is a dignity for a Secretary of Defense to say such nonsense.
And in terms of a breach of international law, I mean, you outlined it there pretty clearly, but there's no international discussion about this in particular, is there? I mean, it does seem to be quite clear. A deconfliction zone has been declared by America in another country which hasn't been sanctioned by the government of that country, a clear breach of international law, but nobody's saying anything about it.
Well, that's time somebody's saying anything about it, and those of us who are free minds and free researchers and not paid by anyone to say something else can say these things, and we will keep on saying this. There is no, I mean, whatever you, if you find Al-Assad the world's worst or history's worst dictator, let's imagine that he is. Nothing can defend morally or in terms of international law what the West has done with its allies and terrorist allied groups in Syria. I've been to Aleppo, I've been to Damascus, I've seen the destruction. Even if his president was the worst man who has ever walked on two legs on the earth, You do not do this harm to a civilian people, to destruction of towns and infrastructure, to making 12 million people in need of humanitarian aid, and over 6 years, 400,000 perhaps people have been killed, and millions of people have fled their homes. Now, is this the way you want to treat somebody you don't like? This is unheard of, and somebody has to say that even if we don't like this dictator, whatever you call him, authoritarian leader, I don't care for the word. I've not met the man, so I have no views on it. But if that's what you're going to do, you have to do it with legal means. And that means with the United Nations Security Council mandate or something else that would allow foreigners to be in this country. This is basically a proxy war. And it's time somebody speaks up and says this very clearly.
Okay, Jan, look, thanks for your thoughts tonight. We do have to leave it there, but that was...
Are now reporting that they're planning enormous and important joint military events in their future. Now, this is after a meeting in which the two countries apparently have agreed on a military roadmap until 2020. These superpowers completed a mass naval drill in the disputed South China Sea this past September. China says that our experts have prepared a roadmap for development in the military sphere between Russia and China in the years 2017 to 2020. And he also said that they're planning enormous, important events, but would not go into the specifics or any details in regards to that. Now, Russia and China have sought to strengthen their political and military ties here in recent years. They've signed a lot of different deals. The whole BRICS thing and deals involving that have involved both parties. And they've kind of been leaning on each other in terms of, on this world stage, having a big ally. China would be standing alone if they didn't have Russia backing them. Russia the same. And here recently, Vladimir Putin had admitted, putting out some statements that Russia would fall in a nuclear holocaust. I guess he believes that they could take down the United States at the same time, but he says no one would survive. But when you have China here in the mix as well, it kind of changes things. Not to mention any other allies that's going to take their side in a time of war, but it looks like they're planning big drills from here on out. Wanted to make mention of it, let it be known. You can expect to see more from here on out between these two countries, at least through 2020. I'll leave a link. It's been WW7.